Welcome to Villain Obscura, a series where we explore obscure and forgotten villains. When Masters of the Universe figures hit shelves in 1982, there were three villains: Skeletor, Beastman, and Merman. Zodak, the Cosmic Enforcer, was portrayed as a villain sometimes, a hero others, but mostly neutral. In Wave 2, several iconic evil warriors would join Skeletor's legions: Trapjaw, Triclops, Evelyn, and Faker. Wave 1 figures included mini-comics that were more like storybooks with Alfredo Alcala illustrations. Wave 2 featured stories written by writers from DC Comics. Both of these waves predated the lore that would begin with Filmation, and featured characters that were being produced as figures to help market them. With Wave 3 mini-comics, the Filmation storylines began to cross-pollinate, and there were adaptations of Filmation episodes, as well as original stories. Most notably about these Wave 3 mini-comics was several of them featured characters that were not destined for toy aisles. The mini-comic The Secret Liquid of Life shipped with the following figures: Fisto, Jitsu, CobraCon, Mossman, Ramman, Stinkor, Trapjaw, Triclops, Webstore, and Whiplash. As a kid, mine came with my Jitsu figure. When I opened the figure and took the mini-comic out, I was expecting to find a story that explained who Jitsu was. After all, most of the Wave 2 mini-comic stories presented origins for how the various villains entered the storyline. But this comic had no trace of Jitsu. Instead, we got two new heroic characters, an extremely off-brand Tila, plenty of creatures, an evil henchman, and Geldor. The character of Geldor was created by writer Michael Halpern and was designed by artist Larry Houston. Houston's pencils on the mini-comic were inked by Michael Lee. Houston has stated that there were no models for him to reference for the supporting characters, which allowed him to design their looks. At the time, Larry Houston was working freelance at the animation studio Ruby Spears. One of his assignments was a Saturday morning Mr. T cartoon. He has stated there may have been some subconscious influence from Mr. T on the design of Geldor's look. In story, Geldor is in pursuit of the secret liquid of life. To attain this goal, he has his wizard pretend to have captured the daughter of Torgal, Princess Maran, to trick him into divulging the location of the secret liquid of life. With the help of Maran's suitor, Prince Daikon, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe defeat Geldor and his evil wizard, as well as his army of gnolls and other monstrous creatures. In his final battle with He-Man, the glass canister containing the secret liquid of life is shattered and causes a tree to grow rapidly, defeating him once and for all. For 1980s kids, at this point conditioned to the mini-comics reflecting characters that were to come, many of us expected Prince Daikon, Princess Maran, and Geldor to arrive on store shelves in 1984. However, as wave after wave arrived, none of these characters materialized. And by 1985, we'd mostly forgotten that these one-shot characters had existed. The arrival of the Evil Horde and the Princess of Power line guaranteed that there were plenty of new characters on the store pegs to capture our imaginations. When the Masters of the Universe line ended in 1987, with most products gone from store clearance shelves by 1988, and the pegs of dump bins of KB Toys by 1990, just in time for the new adventures of He-Man, Geldor and company were mostly forgotten. Masters of the Universe was resurrected in the early 2000s in a line of toys and cartoon referred to as 2000X or MYP for Mike Young Productions, the company responsible for the new cartoon. Through 2 seasons of the new show, there was no sign of Geldor, nor was there a suggestion of him ever being considered for the toy line or for the supplemental comic books. After all, he was a fairly obscure villain who would have been remembered only by the most die-hard devoted fans. By the end of the 2000X toy line, there was little hope that we'd ever see a Geldor figure. In 2008, the Masters of the Universe Classics line began, and during the course of its lifespan, it managed to include many obscure characters from the then 25-year history of Masters of the Universe. In 2012, the first Classics fan choice poll was held, and Geldor was the winner. The figure would be released in the fall of 2013. The figure was mini-comic accurate, utilizing the standard Classics buck and the more realistic sculpting that was the hallmark of that line. And while Classics, like the Vintage line, was one that heavily relied on the reuse of tooling and parts, Geldor featured a brand new head sculpt, new loincloth, new armor, new boots, and 2 new accessories. The axe he used in the mini-comic, and a canister of the secret liquid of life. He also included a sticker sheet with labels for the various factions that existed within the Classics line. As was standard for Classics figures at this time, there was an extensive bio on the back of the card which sought to combine the vintage mini-comic story with the modern Classics storyline, which drew from all incarnations of Masters of the Universe lore. With his inclusion in Classics finally delivering a figure that for many had been long sought after, it would seem like the end of Geldor once and for all. Especially since he'd only had the one mini-comic appearance, and he only had the one look. There wasn't much need or demand for any variation of this character. However, starting in 2020, Mattel relaunched Masters of the Universe in a toy line called Origins, which promised retro play with modern posability. Over the last few years, Origins has seen the release of nearly every vintage figure, as well as some characters who had only appeared in the Classics line, and even a few new characters who had only existed previously as concepts. In early 2024, Mattel announced that Geldor would be released once again, but this time in Origins scale and packaging, and as a Mattel Creations exclusive. He went on sale at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on November 12, 2024. Geldor, like his Classics counterpart, reuses several pieces of tooling, but again features new tooling unique to the figure. His basic body is the same buck that has been utilized for male characters since Wave 1. The head and chest armor are new pieces, as are his boots. The shield is a reuse of the Wave 1 He-Man shield. His skirt is a reuse of the Origins Cartoon Collection Skeletor. 2 of the axes are a reuse of axes that were first released with the deluxe Ram Man figure back in the first wave of deluxe figures. The 3rd axe is all new tooling based on the axe Geldor used in his original mini-comics appearance. The new pieces of this figure that had an armor don't have any obvious reuses for future figures. The new boot ankle pieces for this figure could be reused for a Cartoon Collection Strong War. While Strong War's boots are slightly different, they are close enough that they could be an easy reuse. The boots could also be reused to make Prince Daikon if Mattel opts to explore more of the original characters from the original Secret Liquid of Life mini-comic. So while Geldor is still a fairly obscure villain, he has received 2 figures and has a small but devoted fan base who will surely be excited to receive their Mattel Creations Origins figure of this character. Hopefully Mattel continues to use this method to deliver more obscure but fan-beloved villains in the future for the Origins line. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Villain Obscura. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click the like. If you would like to see more like this, you should subscribe and set the bell notifications. You should also check out my Masters of the Universe History and Tooling playlist. Thank you for watching. I'm Allison Troy, Retro Toy Princess, and I'll see you in the next one.